A teaching dossier is a wonderful form of critical self-reflection. It gives you a chance to take stock of what you've done, to take your own pedagogical pulse, to figure out what the philosophy and the guiding vision of your classroom practice is, and to really map a way forward. It should be in some ways an act of becoming a better teacher, thinker, scholar, and collaborator. But that sounds awfully daunting, and we're not taught how to do that kind of dossier work, and we're often not supported in our own institutions to do that critical self-reflection with support. So today, I'm just going to give you a couple of quick tips on how to start or engage in that process. The first one is to know your audience. In every good writing piece, you have to know who your audience is. Who are you talking to? And for teaching dossiers, I find one of the most powerful audiences is yourself. Your current self and also your future self. Sounds a bit odd, but if you are talking to yourself and thinking through some of those complexities of teaching, it allows you to have that critical in front of self-reflection. Teaching dossiers are not a glorified CV. They're not a way that you are celebrating your accomplishments. It's not a laudatory narrative. It should actually tuck in to some of the difficulties and complexities that we encounter on a day-to-day basis. So know your audience. Are you sending it out into the job market? Are you using it for promotion, evaluation, and review? Or are you using it for an institutional teaching award or a 3M? The fourth answer, and the one that I find the most valuable, is you're doing it for yourself. You're doing it to put all those pieces together, to look backwards, to find some spaces that might be disparate or disconnected, and to weave it into a kind of coherent philosophy. So if the first thing is to know your audience and to know your context, the second one is to do a deep dive in the work that you've done. So a philosophy of teaching is usually about 1 to 2 pages. When I first started out and I was on the job market, my writing performance was pretty standard. I replicated a lot of the same things that most of my colleagues were doing, which is teaching and research are mutually exclusive. I love going into the classroom and listening to my students. I try to provide transparency in assignments and assessment and try to meet the learner where they are. Now, while all of these statements are true and they're hopefully embedded in all of our philosophies of pedagogy, it didn't distinguish me from anybody else, and it certainly didn't allow me to do any of that critical self-reflection. What am I challenging with? What am I doing right? What am I doing wrong? What are the gaps or blind spots that I encountered that surprised me? Now, that caveat, going back to point number 1, is if you are going to the job market, the messy journey is not part of your performance. Try to be authentic. Try to be honest with yourself. But taking that risk and exposing yourself in that vulnerable space should be really reserved for promotion to full professor, going for an institutional teaching award, or a 3M. So know your audience and know how honest you want to be and how messy you want to be in that process. The third thing to do is to understand evidence of teaching in very different ways. So yes, okay, an excerpt from a syllabus is useful. An excerpt from the instructions for an assignment are good. But also think of different forms of engagement or evidence. Do you want to take pictures of your classroom with permission and consent? Do you want to use ways in which you have used infographics or websites? You can do screen captures of things that you've done. Try to think about the ways in which you engage with your students, both inside the classroom and beyond, in meaningful ways, and try to capture them. And then in that evidence, write some critical self-reflection paragraphs. Try to think about it as an ongoing journey that is tied to your founding philosophy. Now, one of the big questions that I get asked a lot is, how do you anchor your teaching philosophy in practice? So you might have a guiding vision and a set of values, but what does that look like in practice? And how do you make sure that you're constantly evaluating that for yourself? And all I can say is to make sure that when you have a guiding vision, mission, and values, when you have those basic fundamental principles that you believe in, so it could be, courage, kindness, generosity of spirit, curiosity, then try to ask yourself the question, do my assignments, do my assessment, do my syllabi all model those kinds of values. And if they don't, that actually requires you to do a bit of a paradigm shift with your assessments and assignments. Sometimes you start with a guiding vision, and then over the course of a few years or a decade or a career, you're going to change, you're going to realign, you're going to challenge yourself in different kinds of ways. Make sure that your teaching dossier is a living document, not something as a static repository. So I wish you luck. It is really a difficult writing performance. It's one that is ongoing, but modeling a growth mindset rather than as a fixed document for me has always been really helpful. It's the hardest thing that I ever write, but I go back and I read my teaching philosophy and my educational philosophy pretty regularly. Certainly when I start a new term, I go back and read it and make sure that all of the things that I'm doing in designing and modeling, both explicitly and implicitly, are all aligned with my guiding vision. So happy writing, and we're here to give you support when you need feedback, which is always a really, really important part of getting better, more thoughtful, and more complex.